Welcome back to the Dash 2 podcast. I am your host, Logan. Today, we got a full slate here, especially for, early August. We got Maple Leafs news, captaincy removal, offer sheets, burner accounts, and most importantly, we will be ranking the top 10 hockey nations in honor of the Olympics ending. So, let's get into it. So it is Tuesday, August 13th. It is 10 o'clock. I'm very glad I did not record yesterday as, a lot of big news came out today. Auston Matthews, we're going to start with. So Toronto, their genius move of the offseason was to rip the C off of John Tavares and give it to Auston Matthews. It's not something that I haven't seen before. Obviously, we're going to get into this as we go on, but, San Jose did it to Jumbo Joe after, a couple playoff disappointments. So it's not the first time I've seen it. It's definitely a very unique move. I don't think that it's ever really paid off for any franchise that has ever done it to their captain. I feel like generally it causes a rift in the room one way or another. Even if the player's super well respected, who's getting the C from the other player that was respected, it's certainly a weird move. Tavares was captain for the last 5 years. His play has declined. I think he's been there for 7 years now, so this is his 8th season. They finally gave somebody a C his 2 years in. I don't know why they didn't give it to Matthews then, if you wanted to give it to him now, but maybe he was too young, whatever. He's now 26, so I guess he's more experienced. He's clearly the best player on the team. There's really no doubt about that, but I don't think that always means that you're the best player. Thinking of, the last couple of years, Brad Marchand was arguably the best player on the Bruins for a few years. He didn't even have a letter for a while. Tyler Seguin for a bit when he was the best player on the Stars didn't have a letter. Patrick Kane on the Blackhawks for all of the cup runs, he never had a letter on his jersey as well. So being the best player does not mean that you always deserve to have the C. I mean, you have fucking Boone Jenner in the league and he's the captain of the Blue Jackets, and there's no way that he's the best player on his team. So I don't know if switching the captaincy, Tavares is obviously a vet. He's been around the league for a while. His play has dipped dramatically in the last 2 years. I mean, he's still a 70-point guy, but you're paying a mid, probably at his peak, he's a decent second line center, but you're paying him premium $10 million contract. So it's a little rough. I don't know. They didn't really have that many choices. I feel like Tree Living is handcuffed as far as, if you're not going to move Marner, you got to do something. So changing the leadership group, I'm sure Tavares will end up still having a letter anyways, but I don't know. I just don't think it's the genius move of the offseason and the one to really put your hat on as a GM and say that you've made a mark on the roster. Tanev and OEL coming in, great start. We talked about that last week. But, not moving out any of the big dogs that haven't been able to get over the hump with Toronto, I just don't see how giving Matthews the C is the move. I'm sure he's a great leader. I really haven't seen it. I think we'll get to see it in the Amazon documentary that's coming out this winter with Nylander being in it. So I'm sure that they're probably going to focus on him a bit in it, and we'll see the dynamic in the room and see who really gets to speak that much. Because I have a feeling that Matthews is more like a lead-by-example guy than anything else, but who really knows until we get to see the footage. But, they've also had, Marlowe was there, Joe Thornton was there, Jason Spezza, all these guys that have been around the league for a long time and been in the game and leaders. I feel like he's probably learned a lot over the last few years, but it's certainly going to be interesting to see how he takes over the captaincy role this first season. But it's not super common for teams to strip captaincy, so I just want to go over some historic examples of this. So San Jose did it twice. Patrick Marleau got his captaincy ripped, and it was given to Rob Blake in his last year in the NHL. Just a team that lacked direction, so they gave it to Rob Blake. Then Blakey retired. They gave it over to Jumbo Joe, who later had it ripped off his chest for Joe Pavelski. That one was immediately after the reverse swept. After they were reverse swept by the Kings. So unsurprising, like another example of not being able to right the ship. So they just take it away. The Kings did this. Dustin Brown lost his seed to Anze Kopitar. Dustin Brown was a great player on the 2012-2014 Cup runs. 2016, the Kings were in a downspin, and he kind of sucked at that point in his career. So that coupled with beef with Daryl, what's his last name? Really? Daryl Sutter. There's a million Sutters. I don't know how I forgot that. Daryl Sutter was not happy with him, so they took it away, gave it to Kopi. I think obviously Kopi has been there for a long time at this point, and his play hasn't really dropped yet. So that was a great pick. They still haven't made it to the promised land, but it is what it is. The Quebec Nordiques did this to Joe Sakic, gave it to some no-name by the name of Mike Huff. They thought that Huff was going to overtake Sakic and that they were going to trade him, but, this is the mistakes you make when you end up having to sell your team to Colorado. The Dallas Stars did it to Mike Modano and gave it over to Brendan Morrow. Modano and the Stars kind of just underwhelmed for a few years, so they thought it was, especially because he was aging, they thought it was time to get a new voice, I guess. Mark Messier, he stole Trevor Linden's C in 1997 when he went over to the Canucks. He later forced Trevor Linden to get traded, and then he drove the Canucks single-handedly into the ground before he forced a trade over to New York. And then when he arrived in New York, he stole the captaincy from Brian Leetch. He does have the leadership award named after him, so I think he's a pretty good captain. But two examples there. The Blues did this to Brett Hull and Chris Pronger. So Brett Hull lost his captaincy to Shane Corson. He just didn't see eye to eye with the coach, and then he left the team like a year later. Pronger lost his captaincy to Al McGinnis. Same kind of deal, issues with management, and then he left 2 years later and went off to Edmonton. The Ducks took the C off Scott Niedermayer and gave it to Chris Pronger. That's a unique situation because Niedermayer was injured to start the year and was out for most of the year. The Flyers did this to Eric Lindros. They stripped it away because he said the trainers could not diagnose his concussion, and they fucked it up for the second time in a season. So they just stripped it away from him. The Lightning took away Vinny Lecavalier and gave it to Dave Andreychuk. Lecavalier kind of, I don't think he's a lead by example guy, not really a talker, so that makes sense. Andreychuk is definitely more of a locker room presence. The Devils took it from Elias and gave it to Jamie Langenbrunner. Jesus. Again, they just didn't like how quiet Elias was, so they gave it over to Langenbrunner. And then the Caps did this to Adam Oates in 2001. I don't know. I don't think Adam Oates is a very interesting, happy guy. So I'm not surprised they took it away. And another person who probably leads by example and doesn't talk much. So we'll move on now. So from one Leaf situation to another, a former Leaf, I guess, at this point. Ilya Samsonov, he signed this season with the Vegas Golden Knights. The NHL came out with their top 10 goalies in the league, and he chose to comment on it and commented with number 10 with a heart. Number 10 on that list was Linus Ullmark, who is now a Ottawa Senators player. And then Samsonov replied to his own account with his main account and said that Ullmark better be prepared for November 21st unless he gets injured again. Kind of weird. He is a Russian, so you got to factor that in. They don't have normal social cues. They're a little bit out there. I don't know what's in the water over there, probably cocaine and other substances. But so that was weird. But I guess Ullmark on another podcast said that the Leafs should have gone with Joseph Woll in the playoffs because they were having a much harder time scoring on him, which I think everybody can agree. Samsonov clearly took that to heart and got his feelings hurt. So now he's challenging Ullmark to November 21st as if he's better than Ullmark, or as if the Knights aren't better than the Sens on paper. I don't think this is going to turn into anything important. So, but it is always good when a professional athlete gets caught not using a burner account. Shout out KD for that one time that he was saying that he hadn't. We replied to a fan saying that KD had no help. It was just Rust and nobody else, and then didn't realize that he was on his main account. So that's what I like to see. I want to see more professional athletes being unprofessional. That's the go-to. Last bit of news, we have offer sheets. So St. Louis is looking to fuck the Edmonton Oilers. So Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg, both coming off pretty decent playoff runs. Broberg got inserted into the lineup a little later into the run, but Holloway was there the whole way through. Really impressed kind of with his two-way game. He had 5 points throughout the run as well. But they're RFA right now, which means that you obviously have to offer sheet them. Broberg got a 2-year, $2.24 million average annual value deal, which he accepted. And then Holloway got a 2-year, $1.1 million deal, average annual value. So they both accepted it. The Oilers are over the cap. They're $354,000 over the cap. I don't know if they can even – I don't think they can get around it. Even with Evander Kane being injured, they might be able to match it. They should be able to match it. But Broberg, that's a bit of an overpay. And then Holloway, I think that's a great deal. So they should probably just accept that one if they're going to do one and not the other. In the event that the Oilers do not match this, the Blues have to give up a second rounder for Broberg and a third rounder for Dylan Holloway. So it's not something that we see a lot, and I always like seeing it, mostly because it's drama and you can see somewhere down the road that one GM is going to get this GM back. You look at the Canes with the Habs when Aho was an RFA. The Habs threw a pretty team-friendly deal at Aho, which he accepted. I think it was like probably high sevens, I want to say. So he accepted it right away. The Canes then, in return, qualified it immediately, and they never forgot it. And when Kotkaniemi became an RFA, they offer-sheeted him, stole him away for like $5 million. So they had to give up like a first-round pick, but they stole their third overall pick from them as a fuck you for offer-sheeting Aho. So I always like the pettiness. We'll see if this turns into anything down the road. But we're going to get to the main event now. So I kept it to a list of 10 for ranking all of these countries. Once we get out of there, we start talking about like Belarus and fucking Kazakhstan. It's pretty good, I guess. And we start branching out, and then there's not a lot of NHL players, so it's kind of hard for me to gauge how truly good they are. Basically, top 10 is just routine World Championships, World Juniors is kind of how I pace it. Like, how much are you a threat if we go into best on best? How likely are you to place? How likely are you to win? This is important to know because it's just best on best. Because if we're doing like World Juniors and stuff like that, it gets very different. So let's start off the list. So we're going to start off number 10. I think this one's pretty obvious. I don't think that there's a lot of options when you look at number 10. We're going to go with Latvia. So Latvia is our number 10 nation in the world. Notable, other countries, Denmark, Norway, Austria. They're all right in that pack. Couple NHL guys, couple fringe NHL guys, but I think Latvia always has a game in the World Championships, the World Juniors. They always have a game where a goalie comes out and steals it. So they got Arturs Shilov of the Canucks and Elvis Merzlikins, who famously had a insane World Juniors run, I want to say probably 10 years ago at this point. But their goaltending is always solid. They recognize that, so they do play a pretty defensive game. And they have one-time All-Star and Buffalo Sabres legend Zemgus Jizstains. So I guess that's pretty much it. There's not a lot of people to go over on that team, so I don't think that we need to waste more time on it. The next run definitely was a little bit harder for me to place. So at number 9, I have Slovakia. So Slovakia used to be an absolute powerhouse. You had Marian Hossa, Zdeno Chara. Trying to think. Other guys, Zygmunt Palffy. You got Pavel Demitra, Marian Gaborik. Like all these guys, especially in the 2010s, they made this team a legit contender, and they were always interesting. Especially in that 2014 Olympics, they were pretty good. I'm pretty sure they beat the U.S. in like the group stage, or at least gave them a run. So, former powerhouse, but they're kind of starting to get up there. The only like real solid concurrent NHLers that they have, Eric Cernak and Farabee on the Capitals. They're solid defensemen, pretty okay. Slavkovsky, obviously, former first overall pick. He's got a fat deal from the Habs, and he's starting to turn around his career, so that's good. Martin Popisil in Calgary. He was a great player this year. He had a really strong showing. And then Nemec of the New Jersey Devils is also a young, solid defenseman that's coming up. So I think they're starting to get back in with the talent pool. It's only a matter of time before we start talking about them a little bit more. Germany coming in at number 8. So they have the high-end talent. Leon, arguably the second best player in the world. Mo Seider, elite defenseman. Stützle, also a former 90-point guy. I think he had 82 points last year. So point-per-game guy, superstar. The top end is really good. They even have J.J. Peterka, who lit it up in Buffalo last year, and I think he's only going to get better. He's going to be like a really strong top 6 forward. Philip Grubauer in net is another great goalie to have. But, when we start looking at the depth, it kind of drops off quite a bit. This is the thing with some of these like third-tier teams. It's like you'll have like a really good NHL player, and then it drops off. It's like Slovenia. When Slovenia made the Olympics, it was all Anze Kopitar and then nobody else you've ever heard of. So it makes these like not typical hockey countries. We think more like a Nordic region for those. It's definitely harder for Germany and not really Slovakia because they were former there, but not a traditional hockey team. It makes it a lot harder for them to grow stars and then have them produce. So that's why they're coming in at number 8. Got a lot harder on number 7 and number 6 and number 5, honestly. Switzerland has become a pretty solid contender in the last couple of years. Obviously, they have some very experienced NHL guys in Roman Josi, Kevin Fiala, Timo Meier, Nino Niederreiter, and Nico Hischier. That's 2 captains of NHL franchises. A point-per-game guy in Fiala, an almost point-per-game guy in Meier, and then Nino Niederreiter's been around for, I think, almost 15 years at this point. So that's a really strong core to have. When you bring up Jonas Siegenthaler, formerly of the Devils, I'm pretty sure he's on not the Blackhawks, the Blue Jackets right now. And then J.J. Moser's coming up. He played for Utah last year, and now he is in Tampa, and I'm sure he's going to continue to get better because if you can play good in Utah, you can certainly play 10 times better when you're in Tampa. That's a much better system. They also have some depth forwards, like Philip Kurashev's. He's plays for the Blackhawks. He's pretty good. Third line guy. Pius Suter, also a pretty good guy, third liner. And Akira Schmid in that is pretty serviceable. So that's a pretty solid roster. I think they're definitely in a much better place than Germany is, just based off the amount of talent that they have. 5 guys to 3 is definitely a lot better. And then you throw in the defense, like you can like Yossi is basically like a fourth forward, but you pair him with a strong shutdown guy like Siegenthaler. That's a really strong line. Number 6, and honestly probably my favorite country out of the bunch, is the Czech Republic. They're filled with NHL regulars and the god of the Czech Republic, which is David Pastrnak. So you got a 110-point guy. You have Filip Hronek, who just had an unbelievable season with the Vancouver Canucks. Martin Necas, who just re-signed with the Canes. He's definitely got a lot of offensive upside. I think he's going to continue to get better. Hopefully when he's no longer on the Canes, if they can swing that. Thomas Hertl, I think we all know about him at this point in his career. Pavel Zacha, who's been having great years over with Pasta in Boston. And then Filip Chytil on the Rangers, who's been injured recently. But, if he does get healthy, he's a great add for this Czech team. You got Pavel Francouz and Mrazek in net. Francouz, career backup. Mrazek, kind of fringe starter guy. Fringe starter on shitty teams, backup guy on good teams. Pretty serviceable goaltending. They got a lot of forward depth. Like, if you go down the list, they have, like, Kubalik. They got you got Lauko if you need a grinder. They got guys who play in the KHL if you need it. You can even put the corpse of Jaromir Jagr on this team if you really wanted to. And then you look on the back end, like, they got David Jiricek, who's supposed to end up being really good for Columbus, but they seem to be fucking up his development. Jan Ruda, who former Stanley Cup champion. Radko Gudas, Stanley Cup champion, piece of shit to play against. So the defense is where it kind of drifts off, but I think they're a solid number 6. The top 5 is really hard. So the remaining teams that we got Finland, Russia, Sweden, the United States, and Canada. So it's kind of hard for you to break in with that level of talent because we're really about to take a jump. So Finland, we have Mikko Rantanen, Alexander Barkov, Sebastian Aho, Roope Hintz. Then we drop off to like a second tier. We got Tuovo Teravainen, Patrick Laine, Arturi Lehkonen. And then it's like a lot of role players in the NHL, third, fourth liners that can round out the lineup. So just from like forward core, they're very skilled two-way guys that can really get the job done all over the ice. And it's kind of nice because you could probably plug and play them all over the place. It's definitely a better situation than any of the other teams I've previously mentioned as far as forward core alone. But even when we get into the defense, like the defense on paper isn't that great, but compared to who we've already mentioned, it's light years ahead. So they got Miro Heiskanen, Esa Lindell, Joki Harju, Mikkola, and Ristolainen. If that's an NHL team, you're probably pretty happy with your core. Obviously, Ristolainen's kind of dropped off a cliff. Joki Harju also did not meet his full potential in Buffalo. But who is reaching their full potential in Buffalo? I don't think anybody is. Saros is probably the key to this team. UC Saros in net is obviously he's incredible for the Predators, and I don't think that would stop in an international tournament. But again, like the remaining teams that we have not, or the remaining countries that we haven't touched yet, I mean, Sweden, the U.S., Canada. Canada, not really. They don't have somebody comparable to a Saros, but the remaining countries definitely are much stronger in that and overall star power. So I'm very comfortable with Finland coming in at number 5. Russia coming in at number 4. I spent a lot of time deliberating their spot. I moved them they were second at one point, then they were third, then they were fifth, then they went back to fourth. I moved them back to third, and then I settled on fourth for them. So, let's talk superstars. Nikita Kucherov, Artemi Panarin, Kirill Kaprizov, Alex Ovechkin, Andrei Svechnikov, Pavel Buchnevich, and then Valery Nichushkin. And then you get a whole bunch of other guys like Kirill Marchenko, fucking Evgeny Malkin, you name them. There's a whole bunch of guys that you can throw in to round out the rest of the forward core. The defense is also pretty solid. Sergachev, Dmitry Orlov, Ivan Provorov, Artem Zub, Nikita Zadorov, Pavel Minchikov, who's a nice rookie who's probably going to get better this season. So if the best on best tournaments allow Russia to be involved, I think they're going to be a very, very strong contender. And the main reason as to why is you look at the goaltending. They have the 3 best goalies in the world on this one team. So you got Andrei Vasilevsky, got Ilya Shesterkin. No, I fucked it up. It's not Ilya. It's Ilya Sorokin. And then what is Shesterkin's first name? The fuck? Hold on. Igor. It's too many eyes. So Igor, Ilya, and Andre. All in the net. I mean, Vasi's having a bad game. Put Shesty in. If Shesty is... you could literally go 1, 2, 3. You could give each one a period, and you would probably be all set. There's no way that you're going to be able... like, these are going to be very close games if Russia's involved, solely due to the goaltending. I mean, that's probably 90% of the Vezina votes in the last 5 years. And then if you want to throw Bob in there, like Bob had a great year, you can throw Bob in there. And then you got 4 of the best goalies in the world. So the only issue, though, is that I feel like there's not a lot of tough Russian players. I mean, Zadorov's probably the only guy that you could put on this roster that would give it a little sandpaper, which... I mean, it's not a big deal because when you play Olympic, like you're playing on bigger ice, so you're not really you're favoring the skill. Like that's how the KHL plays. Same with all of the teams over there, all of the leagues over there. They all play on bigger ice, so you're favoriting that style of play, like way more skill based and a lot more speed. But if we're doing best on best, some of these top teams like Canada, US, you start getting gritty, and then some of these bottom feeders, like they don't really have anything else to do. They have to play physical. So that's where it gets scary. Coming in at number 3, another one that I spent a whole lot of time trying to figure out where they go. Sweden at one point was 5th, and then they were 4th, and then they were 3rd. Consistency throughout their lineup. The defense is probably a very strong point of contention for them. Victor Hedman, Rasmus Dahlin, Erik Karlsson, Hampus Lindholm, Jonas Brodin, Matthias Ekholm, Rasmus Andersson, Gustav Forsling. All of these guys are unbelievable. Hedman and Dahlin as your top pair. I fucking love that. Karlsson with Lindholm. I think that's very complimentary. Or even fucking put Ekholm with Karlsson with the way that he plays with Bouchard in Edmonton. He's shown that he can shut it down, especially as we got into the playoffs. We kept progressing. I was incredibly impressed with how well he stood up. Then we look at the forward depth. We got Pettersson, Willie Stiles, Zibanejad, Philip Forsberg, Jesper Bratt, Adrian Kempe, fucking Lucas Raymond, William Karlsson, Elias Lindholm. We take a little drop with those last two, but there's a lot of guys that like Lindholm and Karlsson, you can put penalty kill, pretty solid players. And then you get down to goaltending, like Linus Ullmark in net, obviously fresh off Vezina, not this season but last, and then Jacob Markstrom in net as well. It's pretty solid team, and I think they stack up better on paper than Russia does, especially when you put in for like play style. I just like the way that this team would play on ice way more. So now we are down to 2. I think we all figured that we would probably be down to these 2. Obviously, I am going to be impartial to the United States, but in this case, I am not. Coming in at number 2, we have the United States. Again, this one took me so long to figure out. I had the U.S. at number 1 coming into it, and then I really stared at the rosters, and it's hard with Canada because of all of the talent that they have, but the United States, their goaltending, you got pick your poison. You have Connor Hellebuck, you have Jacob Ottinger, you got Thatcher Demko, and Jeremy Swayman. I think that it kind of explains itself. All of those guys are incredibly good. Sway had an unbelievable playoffs. Demko was out of his mind in the regular season. Otter is Otter, and then Hellebuck is a great regular season goalie. He has kind of lost the plot in the playoffs, but it is what it is. So you can argue that that's just as good as Russia, if not more. Defensively, we got a great top three D-men. Quinn Hughes, Adam Fox, Charlie McAvoy. I think McAvoy is more of your shutdown guy out of those three. He's obviously the shutdown guy out of those three. But, with somebody like Quinn Hughes, you can pair him up with a Jacob Slavin, who is absolute shutdown. Adam Fox, you can pair him up with Zach Werenski. Brock Faber is incredible. If you want to pair him with McAvoy, that's like that would be an unbelievable shutdown. You can have Jacob Chikrin if you need a little offense in your lineup, or John Carlson if he bounces back from his injuries that he's had the last couple of years. The forward core, I would say, is comparable to Canada. I think Canada has the edge, but we got Austin Matthews, Jack Hughes, both of the Kachucks, Jason Robertson, JT Miller, Jack Eichel, fucking Jake Gensel, Kyle Connor, Clayton Keller, Dylan Larkin, Patrick Kane, Tage, Besser, DeBrincat, like all of these guys are incredibly talented, very strong. The Kachucks add a dynamic to your lineup that not a lot of other teams do. Having a certified piece of shit in your lineup is great. If you can have two certified pieces of shit in your lineup in the Olympics, you're even better. So I don't think that teams are going to be able to compete, especially if you split them up. Like if you have Matthew Tkachuk playing with Austin Matthews and I don't know, you want to put Keller, Clayton Keller, because that was a line from the National Development Team. So you put Austin Matthews, Clayton Keller, and Matthew Tkachuk on the first line. And then third line, you go Dylan Larkin, fucking Kaner, and then Brady Tkachuk. Like two super speedy guys, a guy who makes his money in front of the net and is a piece of shit to play against. That's incredibly advantageous, especially when you look to these other teams that are all skill-based. I think the grit is going to be something that's incredibly important as we go into these best-on-best tournaments. Like, obviously, we have the nation's, 4-nation face-off next year, but I think the more important thing that we're going to look at is, so I'm looking at the Olympics. So I'm very excited for that in 2 years in Italy. But at number one, those goddamn Canadians, you can't get rid of them. The only shit thing about this team is the Canadian goaltending situation has really taken a drop in the last couple of years. Carter Hart probably would have been the go-to guy, but he is a terrible human being who's going to be in prison in no time. So he is off the table. So our remaining options, we have Aiden Hill, who won a cup with the Golden Knights. Jordan Binnington. I think Logan Thompson's probably an option. And then we get a little sketchy, and it goes to, like, Tristan Jarry or, like, Cam Talbot. Like, they're decent goalies, but I don't think they're international goalies. Jordan Binnington at a best-on-best tournament would drive me fucking insane because he's a psychopath who thinks he's way better than he is. So I would not enjoy that in any capacity. And I don't think anybody else would. I think everybody's pretty much against Jordan Binnington at all times. The forward core, I mean, fucking McDavid, McKinnon, Crosby. I'd call it there, but that's not enough. Braden Point, Mitch Marner, Sam Reinhart, Brad Marchand, Steven Stamkos, Mark Stone, Matthew Barzal, Robert Thomas, Carter Verhaeghe, Jonathan Marchessault, and Zach Hyman. When you look at that, I feel like the U.S. doesn't have a chance because You have McDavid on the first line with whoever the fuck you want to pair him up with. Then McKinnon and Crosby and probably Marshy will all play on the line. And those guys are going to play hard, and they're going to play defensive, and they're going to fucking run you through a wall. And the puck battles with that line will be insane. Matthew Barzal can probably play with anybody on this team. You got Mark Stone as a shutdown winger if you need him. Stammer, obviously, is Stammer. Great leadership guy. Already won a couple golds. And we go to the defense. You got Cale Makar, Devin Tays, Alex Pietrangelo, Noah Dobson, Dougie Hamilton, Josh Morrissey, Shea Theodore, Evan Bouchard, Drew Doughty, Vince Dunn, Morgan Riley, if you want to go there. Like, you can only have 6 guys on the ice. You can only carry 8 with you. But there's probably, and if you want to throw in like Montour and those guys, like there's even more options for them to pick from. So they're like defensive, I don't even know what you would call it, like pool to pick from is incredibly deep. And I don't think that anybody even comes remotely close to it. So I think that, to recap, we got Latvia at number 10, Slovakia at number 9, Germany at number 8, Switzerland at number 7, Czech Republic at number 6, Finland at number 5, Russia at number 4, Sweden at number 3, the United States at number 2, and Canada as the number 1 hockey nation, according to me. That's all I got. It was a short one. It's a little rough when there's not a lot going on. So I think we're now, back-to-back weeks of like sub 45-minute podcasts. I'm usually hovering at like an hour and a half. So that's pretty impressive for me. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, trying to pump out more clips. Definitely a force and a half, but we're gonna get there. I gotta figure out computers are hard to figure out. I don't know. I don't understand them. Photoshop's impossible to figure out. Even fucking Adobe Premiere is impossible to figure out. And then my computer explodes when I try and upload the podcast, and then it takes me like 2 days to do. So it's a whole mess. But if you made it this far, that's awesome. Thanks, I guess. And you should subscribe to everything and follow everything. You should call your mom, tell her you love her. What else should you do? You should comment on Matt Cook's Instagram and tell him he's a piece of shit for killing Mark Savard 10 to 15 years ago. And yeah, that's all I got. We will see you next week.